Who are you considering when making this decision? This is a key question to always ask. Who am I giving consideration to? We have a great handicap and vulnerability to considering ourselves far more than others, while claiming that we're considering other people. In other words, it's very easy for us to be blindsided and not realize that we are really not giving consideration to others in this decision. The reason why is because we are naturally prone to being deeply self-oriented. And knowing this handicap and this blind spot is critical in becoming a developed quality person, because the more we can recognize this, the more we can make ourselves more objective, less self-oriented and subjective. This is the only way to become a more divine person, because the trajectory is this. We are always working between self-orientation and God orientation, or another word for that would be purpose orientation. And the more purpose-oriented we are and divine-oriented we are, the less self-oriented we are. The more self-oriented we are, the less purpose and God-oriented we are. And this shows up in so many areas of life. When your spouse asks you a question to do something, how much of your consideration to what your response will be is consideration to them versus consideration to you. And I'm not suggesting that you should not consider yourself. You absolutely must consider yourself. However, know how much of the consideration is you in contrast to or comparison to them. Because if it is swayed too much to your side, it will not be a proper consideration. Same thing with our children. How much should you be? And by the way, these are not questions. The equation of consideration is not easy to decide at all. Will fluctuate at different points in our life. It's not something that anyone can tell you should be 48% this way, 52% that way. However, our simple awareness of the amount of consideration we're giving to each side will help us have a much healthier balance in whatever proportions there should be in this particular consideration. Now, this is not only true in our own personal relationships, but this is also true, I see, in major social debates that are going on in the world today and probably have always gone on in the world. And I'm not making a particular statement about any particular area, but I am pointing out that it seems very clear to me that many people who advocate very strong positions regarding different social issues that are going on in society today are entrenched in digging their heels into my rights, and their considerations are way too one-sided. Where that consideration should exactly be, where the barometer is, I'm not making a statement for that. I don't think that anyone can pinpoint that. In many cases, in some cases we can, but in many cases we can. But the point, though, is that we're way too self-oriented. And this whole idea of my rights itself, taking us away from my responsibility, which is automatically giving consideration to purpose and not to self, is swayed way to the side of rights. Here is a clip of Jordan Peterson discussing this in regards to whether a couple should divorce when that's going to impact their kids. And I believe he does a fantastic job at discussing this issue without making any statement of exactly what should be done. Because here's the thing from a Torah perspective, which is God's perspective, which is the true perspective, and that is that we know that there are times that couples must get divorced. That's why the Torah has divorce laws. We don't shy away from that. We try our very best to avoid that, but sometimes it's unavoidable. It must be done. We understand that. And we know that there are children involved and they will suffer from that. But the situation will be far worse if a couple's together. We all understand that if a couple's together and fighting and the children are being raised in a very, very divisive home, that is in many cases far worse than the parents divorcing. And then there are some times that there can be a civil marriage, although unfortunately it's not a very loving one, but they can be very civil. And that will give much more stability to the upbringing of the kids. And that would come at a great sacrifice from the parents, granted. And it may be that that parents who are very purpose-oriented will give that gift to their children at their own expense. And that would be magnanimous, maybe heroic, and sometimes the call of duty, sometimes, right? And that's really what he's talking about here. And from the smirk of, of someone in I don't know, the people who are involved in this conversation, but at least my impression is that from her smirk, it's this: how dare you question my right to get divorced? And Jordan Peterson is not questioning anyone's right to do anything. Anyone can do that. And he's not advocating that the laws of society be that you're not allowed to get divorced. In fact, I don't believe that our government should ever be deciding such things for us. However, we need to have the right tools to make these decisions as well. Let's watch this. It's really, really fascinating.
People having to stay married if they have children. I mean, we are
yes,
two
it's
divorced
better if
men
they
here.
do. It's better if they do.
It's
better for the
I
children.
think most people would agree that that's the best. But as far as I understand, do you think that the laws should say that we have to stay together?
Oh, it isn't obvious to me that the liberalization of the divorce laws in the 60s was for everyone's best interest. Now, exactly what that means, I'm not sure. But we do know that stable, intact, two-parent families are better for children. So, it depends on who you put first.
But isn't that an individual choice and not something the law should decide?
Well, it depends to some degree on whether the law should advocate for children. I mean, children really can't speak for themselves, can they? They need some authority to speak for them. And so we do know, like data, for example, on child welfare indicates crystal clear that children from intact two-parent families do better on virtually every measure that you can possibly imagine. So, but I'm not advocating draconian measures to keep people together who don't want to be together.
The question is this: honestly, and this is the key word. The key word is honestly. And very often we're not in the place where we can even get to that. Often someone outside of us can hear us and tell us whether we're being relatively honest and objective or not. Honestly, who are you considering when you're making a decision? This is key question. Ask yourself this a million times through the rest of your life. Do yourself and everyone who knows you that favor.